As we face a rapid loss of biodiversity, I think we all recognize that there's an urgent need to come together to bring our unique perspectives, skills, and knowledges to help advance integrative solutions to these pressing global challenges. The Institute for Integrative Conservation was developed in January of 2020 with the mission of cultivating an inclusive community of thought leaders to create and deliver timely, innovative solutions to the world's most pressing conservation challenges. The IIC's year-long conservation research program was designed to help us achieve this ambitious mission. This year-long program matches talented undergraduate students, faculty from across the various schools and departments here at William & Mary, with external conservation partners, conduct applied research defined by those conservation partners needed in order to advance their conservation outcomes in the real world. These partners include small and large non-governmental organizations, private corporations, local and national government agencies, and Indigenous communities and local communities. Through collaboration on this student-led research, these interdisciplinary teams aim to support our conservation partners with applied integrative research needed to advance their conservation outcomes. And together, these teams work to build the capacity of the next generation of compassionate and effective conservation leaders. In our first lab meeting with the 2022 Conservation Research Program cohort, I asked them to describe the characteristics of an effective conservation leader. And I was really surprised. I was expecting them to say skills, ambition, or drive. But what came to the top of their list was, in fact, gratitude. And this theme of gratitude was consistent throughout the program with these students. They expressed gratitude for the opportunity they had to work with the conservation partners and faculty on these incredible projects, gratitude for the time and energy their partners and faculty and community partners dedicated to these projects, and gratitude for all the hard work that conservation partners, local communities, and Indigenous people are doing to conserve their environments and the benefits to us all. So along this theme, instead of ending with acknowledgements, I wanted to start with acknowledgements. First, I'd like to thank the conservation partners and faculty members, who the students will thank individually. But I'd like to thank you all for all the time and expertise that you have given to these students and to these projects. It really wouldn't be possible without you. And I would like to thank the IIC community of alumni, parents, donors, and community members who also provided dedicated support to these students and these projects. Specifically, I'd like to thank the IIC team, especially Kathy Francillo, who made this all happen behind the scenes. Kira Chiramatev, who for all of her support and specifically for helping Van with making connections and providing guidance on his work. Camille Andrews from the library, who spent a lot of time helping these students find literature to support their work. And all the various William & Mary departments who made this possible. And then finally, I'd like to thank all of the IIC donors, the William & Mary Charles Center, Highland, and the Mellon Foundation, and all these donors who made this project possible. Thank you so much for all that you did to support the students and these interdisciplinary teams with this research. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our 2022 cohort of Conservation Research Program students up to present their work. So we will have 17 students from William & Mary presenting their projects. They'll give 5-minute presentations. But we also have a student, Diana Perella, who will be joining us all the way from Argentina via Zoom to present her work. Also part of this program and has been working in the field down in Argentina. These presentations will be followed by a short reflection from the conservation partners or faculty mentors. We will save questions for the students and the in-person audience to the reception that we'll do after the presentations. But if you're joining us over Zoom and have questions for the students, please type them in the chat and they will answer them live after they finish their presentation. If you're joining us in person here at William & Mary, we invite you to reception afterward in the undergraduate lounge. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And it's my pleasure to invite Malvika Sharmali up, who is going to be talking about their work with the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center focused on integrative restoration. And thank you so much for your willingness to go first. Sorry.
Hi guys, my name is Malvika Sharmali, and when I started this project with my lovely research mentor, Dr. Mara DeSanta, and my partners at the Smithsonian, Drs. Matt Ogburn and Henry Leggett, then we were interested in restoration of river herring. We have the alewife and the blueback herring back into Virginia River. They're a migratory fish, so the Chesapeake tributaries are very important for their spawning grounds. And we wanted to work with communities while doing this. So thus arose the question, how can we create meaningful and effective relationships with Virginia communities and Indigenous tribes? So why is this such an important topic? Well, conservation has historically focused on one Eurocentric perspective. And because of the settler colonial roots as the United States, there are some inherent power imbalances between the communities and the organizations. But if we can reimagine how we make these partnerships, then we can help to improve conservation outcomes by broadening our scope and focusing our resources, issues that are directly affecting our people today. So this is sort of the process that I followed. Before we get into partnerships, an organization should do a lot of background research as to the specific obstacles and experiences of the community of interest, and also understand the ecological histories and cultures of the area and the community. So to that extent, I'm creating a story map that reflects the cultural histories of Virginia rivers. So I want to ask you guys, what do you think of when you see this? What is your relationship to it and its relationship to the rest of the environment? We all have different ideas of relationships, and an interviewee from Bussey et al. 2014 said, "A tribal member looks at a turtle and sees it for what it is. That's my brother." And I think this is really important to highlight the difference in Western and local or Indigenous approaches to conservation, in that communities can bring a certain thoughtfulness and an intimate connection with the ecosystem that I believe is missing in Western conservation today, hence the need for collaborations to begin with. So this is the sort of collaboration that we are used to seeing. It's a communicative method in which local voices might be considered, but at the end of the day, it's still a Western outlook onto this conservation problem. But if we can switch to a co-management perspective, then we can see the communities and the organizations as equal partners, and the end product is following this two-eyed seeing Indigenous research philosophy, which helps us consider multiple perspectives of conservation. And another important aspect of lots of Indigenous research, I just want to mention, are the 3 R's: respect, reciprocity, and relationality, which are explored in Sean Wilson's Research as Ceremony. Fantastic read. So once we've understood those obstacles and the history and culture, then we can think about how can we make thoughtful decisions to support local voices in conservation about their land, their resources, and their sense of community. And using that information, we can create solutions that provide for not only ecological, but also cultural healing. So how do we navigate those relationships? I think that I have some recommendations here for both the Smithsonian and organizations in general. Communications and settings of meetings and workshops should not be so highly academic, because those can be very intimidating. Instead, we should focus on making communication setting comprehensible and accessible for a non-scientific audience. When we're making decisions about the project, we want to make sure we're geographically close to the area and community of interest, such that our decisions can reflect that thoughtfulness and intimate connection with the land that I mentioned previously. In every step of the project, we want to make sure that consent is given and re-given, such that both parties stay on the same page, because there have been abuses and misrepresentations of consent in the past. And also, consent does not only have to be written. Orality is really important to communities, so consent can also be given orally as well. And finally, compensation. Especially for Indigenous tribes, it does not have to end at monetary compensation. For example, Land Back is a really powerful movement in which Indigenous peoples are advocating for the return of land and other forms of stewardship, such that they may manage their own ecosystem with their ethics instead of having a settler colonial perspective. And lastly, I would love to thank my absolutely lovely research mentor, Dr. Mara DeSanta, and my Smithsonian Environmental Research Center partners, and also the IIC for providing me with such a lovely opportunity. Thank you so much.
We have a brief question from Dr. Henry Leggett about Malvika's work.
My name is Henry Leggett, and I am a scientist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. Restoring the environmental health of our rivers requires the inclusion of local and indigenous communities. Malvika's project has been valuable to us, starting to create a framework for building lasting relationships with these communities to conduct more successful conservation projects that benefit both nature and people. Thank you, Malvika and Dr. DeSmenta, for all of your hard work this year.
Great. Next up, we have Bella Ortiz Miller, who has been working in close collaboration with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to design an app to mitigate bird window collisions.
Hi everyone, my name is Bella. If you've ever heard a loud thump in your house before, you may have witnessed a bird striking your window. It's a really unfortunate event, but even if you haven't had it happen to you, it may have happened when you were out of the house. So that is why I teamed up with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Dr. Swaddle to design an app to mitigate these bird window collisions so that your windows at home stay strike-free. So this is a huge conservation issue because since 1970, North America has had a net loss of about 3 billion birds, and 1 billion bird deaths occur each year in the US alone due to window collisions. So obviously this is a big conservation concern that we want to solve. And although there are already a lot of solutions out there, as you can see, there's these things called feather-friendly tape that you can like apply to your windows so that birds know that the window is there and they can't see through it. There's also like screens and strings that you can hang from your door, your sliding glass door. But a lot of the issue that we found that people have is that they can't decide on which solution that to apply to their windows, or they just don't know about the different solutions available to them. So that is why my main objective in this research is to design a user-friendly app that provides that information to people and assesses the buildings and windows for risk of collisions. So in order to do so, I first started with identifying the users that would potentially use this app. So I did interviews with bird club members, people with bird feeders in their backyards, as well as Fish and Wildlife Service employees and facilities managers. And then once I conducted those interviews, I took all of the things that they said to me and I determined the main features of the app and made a basic mock-up on paper. And then once I did that, I gave users a card sorting activity in which they could put the features of the app where they think is most logical to them. That way I received a sort of framework shown here. This is the compiled all their interview responses and my literature findings into these features and this architecture. And with that being said, here is my final proposed design. So the app starts with you logging in and it asks you, do you want to assess a window or building? Do you want to browse solutions, or would you like to view your progress and community progress? If you start with the window building assessment, it gives you an option for window building. We found that the survey questions for assessing a window would be different from a building. So the different window questions would be like, how large is your window? Do you need a temporary or permanent solution? Because some people rent their homes. Can you see vegetation reflected on the window from the outside? Things like that. And then once you answer all those questions, it'll give you a solution that the app thinks is best for your window. And likewise, if you pick the building assessment, let's say you see a library in your neighborhood and it has a lot of glass on your, that's not bird safe. Just use the app, answer the questions, and then it'll like put that data in a database and then plot it on a map which different people in your community can see. This is the part of the app in which you could just browse the solution. So if you already know a window in your home is receiving a lot of collisions, you can go straight to this feature. It just allows you to sort through them. Let's say you only want like cheap solutions. You could type that in the search bar and then get cheap solutions. And lastly, this is the progress and community page. It'll show you different like people and how many like estimated birds you saved by the windows that you've retrofitted. Because when I was doing my research, I found that a lot of people wanted some kind of reward system for participating in this bird conservation. So this kind of gives them more of a reason to participate. And then you can also, there'll also be like a map that will plot your data and other people's data. So it can be a little like community thing. So in conclusion, that is like the full layout over there on the right. And although it's a little complex, I designed it in a way that is user friendly and in a way that people will actually want to use, because this is what my research has proven that people want to see. And then it will give easier access to information and less decision making for people, so they're more willing to actually retrofit their windows. And with more treated windows, there will be fewer collisions and happier birds. And as a thank you so much, Dr. Swaddle, for all your help, and Joelle Gehring and Eric Kirshner at the Fish and Wildlife Service for partnering with me. I couldn't have done it without any of their help.
I would like to invite Bella, stand here, sorry. Invite Bella's, one of Bella's mentors, Joelle Gehring from U.S. Fish and Wildlife, is joining us over Zoom to unmute and provide a brief reflection on all of Bella's work.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, wonderful. Last year I had some issues. I just wanted to thank Bella and John for all of your excellent work on this project. And it's been a real delight watching Bella learn through this process and develop, and such great contributions that bring us to the next stage of this process. It's so important that we bring this issue of bird conservation and bird collisions to the general public, because that's where it matters. All of us can make an impact on this issue, and it's an important issue. As Bella mentioned, we've lost 3 billion birds over the last 50 years, as far as the population levels have decreased. And bird collisions is a big part of that, and we can all make a difference. So thank you, Bella, for doing such an excellent job bringing this to the next stage of conservation. Great job.
We have Ethan Berkel joining us. We work in collaboration with Conservation International to model habitat suitability of mangroves in order to guide management of the climate.
Hi, everyone. My name is Eitan, and as Erica said, I was working with Conservation International to model habitat for mangroves in the Philippines to help guide future management practices. So the reason that we selected mangroves as our ecosystem is that they are a key ecosystem engineer in coastal environments globally. They're a globally distributed species, and they are also a really important carbon sink. So they can absorb up to 25% of anthropogenically generated atmospheric carbon dioxide, which is a huge number for us moving forward, trying to combat climate change. But they also provide socioeconomic benefits for local communities. They can sustain fisheries. They can provide protections against storms. So they are a very important habitat globally. And we decided that we wanted to center this project around Conservation International seascape approach. What the seascape approach is 15 years ago, Conservation International decided that they wanted to start a program to bring together large multi-sector coalitions globally to help protect and restore the world's oceans. And for the past 15 years, they've brought together a network of over 250 partners in 5 global seascapes to create long-term sustainable climate solutions. The problem is that there's a lot going on in each of these seascapes, and 5 seascapes is a master's thesis worth of data to look at. So we decided to isolate one ecosystem, a mangrove ecosystem, in one seascape, while keeping our methodology in a way that we could apply this elsewhere, so that other projects could be done similar to this one. So we decided that we wanted to isolate the Philippines seascape. And part of the reason is because the Philippines is in the center of a marine biodiverse hotspot. It's called the Coral Triangle in the Western Pacific Ocean. It's home to thousands of marine species, fish, mammals, all types of corals, and it's one of our key biodiversity hotspots in the oceans. And there's also a very well-established Conservation International network in the area with the Sulu-Sulawesi Seascape, more specifically in the Verde Island Passage. There's been a lot of energy put into climate solutions in that area. So we wanted to help supplement some of the projects that they're doing there. And basically what we did is we took remote sensing data from the area, we put it into GIS, and we turned out this. This is a map of mangrove suitability in the entire Philippines. And you can see we've highlighted some areas of interest. Specifically, one area that we're taking a deeper look at is in the top right there. The Palawan Peninsula is an area where there's a lot of energy going into mangrove restoration right now. And so our next steps for this project is to finalize the weights for our model. And once we have the weights, we are going to compare it to current and historical mangrove data to make sure that our model works and that we're looking at the right things. And then once we have that done, we have another student in our lab who's going to be helping us run this model with future climate projections so that we can see how things are going to change and what areas may need more resources and more protection moving forward. And this is kind of the framework that we're going to be using moving forward. We're going to be putting a lot of our energy into habitats that are currently suitable and habitats that will be suitable in the future, looking to protect areas where there are currently mangroves and seeing if we can begin restoration projects in habitats that may be suitable but might not have mangrove forests at this moment. And lastly, I just want to thank the entire Conservation International Oceans and Philippines team, specifically Shannon Murphy, who has been a delight to work with and super helpful with this entire project in getting me where I needed to be and getting me organized. And also, of course, Rob Rose and Erica for putting this entire thing together, giving us the opportunity to do this type of research.
Coach Shannon sent in a written reflection that I'll read here. Eton's work will be able to provide our country programs at Conservation International and their partners with a high-level overview of habitat suitability for mangrove ecosystems across their various project sites. This will help us understand what areas we may need to pay more attention to, where we may need to spend more time validating data on the ground, and what types of interventions we may need to consider, such as restoration or climate adaptation interventions. Since Eton was able to use global and publicly available data, we're excited to share methodology and guidance with other seascape programs to hopefully replicate this model in their mangrove ecosystems, and also build on this model with future climate change projection data to get a better sense of the vulnerability of these mangrove ecosystems to future climate change impacts. Thank you so much, Eton. Next up, we have Natalie Spage, who worked in close collaboration with the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture Program to explore opportunities to engage historically underserved communities in grassland conservation. Welcome up, Natalie.
Thank you, Erica. Good afternoon. This year, I had the opportunity to work with the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture, specifically Anna Matthews of the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture and American Bird Conservancy, and my faculty mentors, Dr. Rob Rose and Mara Sefner. And we worked to develop community and people-centric outreach approaches and strategies to expand diversity, equity, and inclusion in the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture scope, also OPJV for short, as I'll be referring to it. So the OPJV is built around 3 bird conservation regions in Texas and Oklahoma, as you can see in the map here. And their main priority is to build case-by-case land management projects with individual landowners to facilitate bird habitat conservation for native grassland species like quail. And they do this through a program called the Grassland Restoration Incentives Program, or GRIP for short, which offers financial assistance for these programs in exchange for a continued partnership with each landowner, and continued bird monitoring on each property. One big thing that is noticeable in conservation recently is there is a big need for increased diversity and racial and socioeconomic diversity. So this project came about from a call to action by the OPJV because of that noticeable lack of diversity within participants of their GRIP program. specifically among historically underserved producers, which as defined by the USDA is any of these 4 categories here. For us, the main 3 focus groups of this project were socially disadvantaged or historically marginalized racial groups, limited resource, and veteran farmers, which is where they noticed that the main lack of diversity lies. So the significance of this project is that it's really a project about people. It's a conservation challenge for understanding backgrounds of people that they haven't worked with, histories and cultures in the OPJV scope, and just expanding the thought in participants for the Oaks and Prairies joint venture. So the reason they wanted to do this is it allows the OPJV to design projects that are better tailored to each landowner's needs, and also presents a greater diversity of thought in bird conservation efforts. And in order to grow the OPJV properly, you need to think about the birds and the people, which is something that my faculty and conservation mentors have said. So the goal of this project, as I said, is to learn how we can accomplish this. Through my own firsthand accounts in Texas and Oklahoma, seeing how different biologists will work with landowners. I got to see how they would design projects on a case-by-case basis, as I said. My next goal for this project was to research organizations that will help expand the OPJV network, and using geospatial data to see where historically underserved producers will be. And I present these strategies to the OPJV so they can employ them and build upon them even after the conclusion of this project. And learning where historically underserved producers are likely to be, coupled with project success likelihood indexes, is important because it allows the OPJV to put into better perspective their region's diversity. And this map is a perfect example of that. This is the southern focal counties, southeastern focal counties for the OPJV in Texas. And you can see in some of these counties, they're divided up by census tracts with the most recent census data. And percent minority population is higher in a lot of these counties. And so it's important to take note of that in references for the future. So also to accomplish these goals, I spent the spring and early summer researching DEI and other coalitions. I wanted to learn about OPJV maintenance practices with the grasslands, which includes prescribed fire, which you can see in this photo up here. I traveled to Texas on July 24th through the 31st, and yes, it was as hot as you think it was. And I got to learn in person from biologists and researchers, as I said, their individual strategies for developing projects. And I traveled from, let me see, Houston to San Marcos. And you can see in San Marcos, I took this photo at the Texas State University Spring Lake. I also got to travel to Corsicana, Navarro County, College Station, and Gonzales County to visit some ranchers and talk with other researchers from Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute as well. So from this work, I learned that there is a cycle to engaging with communities, much like the OPJV centers their biology projects around the adaptive management cycle. I wanted to adapt it for them here as well. First, learning about communities and your audience is really important, and understanding your own personal biases when trying to engage with certain groups. Always ask questions is the first thing about learning. And then next is planning. So actually meeting diverse groups and then working on building personal relationships. This could look at really different for every single biologist or researcher that I've met. Some people have certain specific strategies that they try to employ. And this also includes incorporating other types of knowledges. For example, knowledges rooted in specific cultural heritage groups. Also doing is attending events, spread the word. Start by meeting people where they are. I actually got the chance to speak with a few biologists from Texas Parks and Wildlife and also the OPJV. And I heard some stories about to build connections, they had to go to church potlucks and just be in person in the community. And that was a really important thing for getting a lot of community members to trust and be open to hearing different conservation goals, and to continue to have conversations about inclusivity within the OPJV and externally. The thing that I wanted to add here is that reflection is really important too. It's key to this cycle because people relations are really complex. And if the desire to build diversity perseveres, the ultimate goal of conservation at the hands of people will also persevere. I also wanted to thank Oaks and Prairie's team, everyone that I've met, specifically my conservation partner, Anna Matthews, and the entire IAC team, my faculty mentors, and Erica and Kathy. Thank you guys for helping me get set up, and everyone that I got the chance to meet in Texas as well. Thank you.
I would like to welcome Anna Matthews from the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture Program, who's joining us over Zoom to unmute and provide a brief reflection on Natalie's work.
Hi, this is Anna. I'm the science coordinator with the Oaks and Prairies Joint Venture just south of Austin. I just wanted to say that it's been a real joy to work with Natalie over the past year. She's been absolutely amazing, and her project is really going to help us expand our reach to new partners with our conservation incentive program so that we can both better serve birds that we're trying to protect and also better serve the people that rely on those grasslands or have historical ties to it. Conservation can't be done without interacting with people. And Natalie's work is really going to help us identify those opportunities and methods to be more inclusive to historically underserved populations, and also start to understand how we can align our goals together and achieve a better future for both people and wildlife within Texas and Oklahoma. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, we have Anna Arnsberger, Bridget O'Keefe, and Josiah Tinsall, who we affectionately call the famous Highland teams. They're going to come present on their work exploring Black foodways at Highland.
There's some list back here, but I can't read it.
Can't see it now.
Me either.
First, we would like to ask everybody a question.
If you need
What's
this for a while,
a
go ahead.
food tradition that your family
just keep it in the
has
background.
that's been passed down through the
Okay.
generations? And so while you're thinking about that, we'll introduce ourselves once again. My name is Josiah Tunstall,
I'm Anna Arnsberger, and I'm Bridget O'Keefe.
and we're exploring Black foodways at Highland. All right. And so first off, let's start. What is specifically are foodways? Foodways are the social, political, and cultural aspects of food. And so the reason that we think this is important, we think it's important in looking at this because we can retell stories from enslaved populations and their effect on descendant communities. And so the reason we specifically chose the James Monroe Highland Plantation is because the James Monroe Highland Plantation is the historical plantation of James Monroe, who is our president. And also they have a very active descendant community who is all populated from this one plantation and another plantation in the area as well.
Yeah, so on to objectives. Our first objective was to record food-related histories for a Highland Community Archive. From the onset of this project, it's been descendant focused and it's been focused in that community. And so a clear objective for us was to create a community archive for the Highland descendants to retain for generations to come. I think that's the most exciting aspect, is that it doesn't stop at this research and it doesn't stop with foodways, but it can be added onto and continued so they can continue to pass down traditions and share that knowledge. But more than that, our second objective is also to share Highland-based foodways knowledge with a public audience. As we got deeper into the research and talked to more people, it became even more clear that the descendants have an interest in sharing their traditions and sharing their knowledge beyond the community themselves. So right now that's looking like for us creating a public website that will be accessed through the Highland website to share our research and share what we found so that we can reach a broader audience and hopefully use it as an educational resource. And then lastly, we're aiming to promote sustainable food practices for future generations. And Anna's going to get into that a bit more later, but this is just a common theme that came out throughout the research. So on to methods. We spent part of our summer in Charlottesville, Virginia, actually conducting in-person, in-depth oral histories with the descendant community at Highland. And then with descendant permission, we were able to record those histories. And now we have those recordings. So in addition to becoming oral historians, we also got very familiar with the camera and editing skills and other software. Probably one of the highlights was actually stepping outside of the interview room at Highland and getting to go into the kitchen, actually with one of the families we interviewed, the sailors. And so we got to see them in action and cook alongside them. And then we got to actually really see our work in action by sitting down for like a bit of a potluck meal. And we each got to bring a family meal or like a family dish that we had. and share it together. And that's really what our project was about, is the ability of food to bring people together and the traditions and histories that it carries. And we actually want to show a little preview of our research. I think that's the best way to kind of get this point across, is to hear from the descendants themselves. And so this video just encompasses a couple of the main themes we found, and also just the joy of getting to work alongside so many amazing people.
My great grandfather, James Garland Monroe, was a slave on this plantation. His father, Ned, he was a slave either as well.
All of us have the great grandfather in common, which is Ned Monroe.
My ancestors helped build and create and build it. My African American heritage. We have the oldest one. We've been here from so many generations. It really have a connection to the area. So I think continuing that tradition and that connection is something that we can do. My grandfather grew up with the property that our family had. We had 3 great big gardens. We grew the corn, the string beans, the potatoes, sweet potatoes.
Well, we learned how to garden. The garden was quite large, and was like the thing, the winter. So that's why I love to cook. Those things I never forgot. I grew up learning.
But I love it. I really love it. I do good. I really good. The families never be able to share it. They always cut it off. Now I used to make a tea, and this man that was there, he said, "What do you put in this tea?" He said, "We can make some money off this tea." He said, "Now what do you put in it?" I said, "Do you really want to know?" I said, "I put a lot of dollars in." If you don't put dollars in it, you won't taste it. If we were out in the yard, he got laughed at our feet from a half a mile away. And we never let you go over and do it. So if you did come to get food, that's what the thing is really wrong.
So that clip just shows like a little bit of what we talked about during our interviews. But throughout all the oral histories, we noticed a few main themes. So first of all, almost all the descendants we talked to had these memories of growing up with large gardens, raising animals, and traditions like hunting, canning, and sharing food with the community. So a lot of these small scale sustainable practices were based off of generations of knowledge about living off of the land and being self-sufficient. For example, Miss Eubanks talked about how her dad would use marigolds as a natural pesticide and fish as a fertilizer. And then the sailors discussed using lime around their smokehouse in order to prevent skippers from getting into their meat. So with this knowledge and with these practices, a lot of the families we talked to didn't really ever have to rely on going to the grocery store because everything they needed, they produced on their own.
Yeah. And directly related to these sustainable practices is this overarching theme of a connection to land. And that includes the Charlottesville area, but also the specific pieces of property that these descendants grew up on and lived off of. We interviewed first Mary Moorhead, who you heard from in the video, and she sort of called our attention to this theme when she said, just knowing that her ancestors have been in the area for so long and have done so much to contribute to being a part of the land, it made her feel connected to the area. And then every single person we interviewed after echoed that same idea, knowing that their history, their family history, their traditions are so tied to this land, it makes them feel connected. And not only connected, but it ties into a sense of responsibility and also pride. We heard that from Miss Chapman in the video, that she feels proud of her ancestors for being a part of that area. And despite the fact that many have moved away and no longer live in the Charlottesville area, these properties, they still remain in a lot of families, and they've been there and they've been passed down through generations, literally since their ancestors were freed and purchased like directly after slavery. And many of them, as Anna was saying, they grew up on the land and they lived off the land. They learned to farm and garden. And so it creates this sense of connection and a sense of hope to one day even return to the land for those who have moved away.
And the last theme we really found in our research is food and family, and how the kitchen was really a gathering and meeting place for a lot of families. And I think that this is perfect for the Sailor family when they talk so much about how they used to go to their grandmom's kitchen or their mother's kitchen, and that's just where she would be all the time. So that's where they would go just to talk to her, get advice, or they would go help her do cooking, or she'll be in there and she'll see them running around like, hey, I need to real quick. But they also expounded on that when one of their grandmothers passed away. They took in their grandfather, he was living with them. And he comes to him and was like, hey, why are you making sweet potato casserole like that? Well, you know, my mom used to do it this way. And now that touches on the innovation and the celebration of these generational foods that they have built in, and how they're combining different recipes from different families and celebrating these foods by still eating them to this day and using them in celebratory dinners like Thanksgivings, Christmases, but also innovating them in healthier ways for everyday meals, because sometimes older recipes are a little out of date.
So we see a few different implications for our research. First and foremost, it's helping Highland in the process of shedding light on and celebrating the stories of enslaved people and their descendants. A lot of these stories have up until now gone like completely erased or unrecognized, despite being integral to the history of Highland and the history of our nation as a whole. But beyond that, the knowledge that we record in our oral histories can be used to promote sustainability and agricultural education in Highland and the community beyond. This is something that was really interested a lot of the descendants we talked to. The idea of using Highland as a resource to educate generations, many of whom may be a little less connected with Albemarle County's history and the traditions of farming there, just about community heritage and community knowledge. So in this way, our work can kind of serve as the basis for future programming at Highland, which may be centered around agricultural education, food sovereignty, and a recognition of the land. And then we just really, first of all, want to thank the Highland Council of Descendant Advisors and all of the descendants we were able to interview for being so open, letting us into their lives, sharing such personal stories. And we really, really cherish all of the relationships we were able to build this summer. We appreciate it so much. And then, of course, Dr. Sarah Bond Harper for all of her help. We wouldn't have been able to do any of this without her and the work she's done to establish these connections with the descendants. And then, of course, our faculty advisors, the IAC, everyone here for supporting us.
So I would like to welcome up Dr. Sarah Bond Harper, who joins us from Highland today, up here, to provide a brief reflection on the students' projects. And also Dan Crystal is joining us via Zoom. If you would like to unmute Dan after as well, provide a reflection, that would be great. Thank you, Sarah, so much for coming over here.
I think you all could see the actual joy that was part of this project in the students, and I share that, and I really enjoyed this. And I know many of the descendants, I don't know if any of them are online. There might be. I think there was a shared joy in this, and I'm grateful for that. So fitting with your theme of gratitude, this project meant a lot to me and to Highland. And together we recognize the physical place-based histories, the family and cultural traditions, and also innovation, and the importance of relationship. And in many ways that was nested in our work together. And to underscore a couple things, the immediate product of this work will be a community archive. As you know, this project was the idea was initiated by the Council of Descendant Advisors. And the stories gathered, the videos that you edit, the photos will be a part of a community archive to be accessed by community members. Maybe the tip of the iceberg being publicly accessible, and then the history is recorded to be passed down to future generations. And that is an important theme of what we are doing in our place-based history at Highland. Also, the idea of community programs, especially for youth, around sustainability and agricultural practice. This also leads us to some good bases for imagining those going forward. So I'll join my thanks to you students, to Erica and the IIC, to Fernando Galeano Rodriguez, to Dan Crystal, and really it's been a joy.
to unmute to provide a reflection, go ahead.
Yes, I hope you can hear me. This is Dan Crystal, and I just want to call out a couple of things. First of all, these three students did a fantastic job at something that was just not really, the path was not absolutely clear for them. They had to figure out a lot of things, and they did something very innovative and impactful, and it was just wonderful to watch. And this is the second year of a connection between IIC and Highland, and a third one is coming. And so I just want to call out IIC for having such a broad idea of what conservation is, so that it can include something like this. It is clearly about sustainability and conservation once you get inside of it, but it might not look like it from the outside. So thank you to everyone. And I also want to just mention that the Mellon grant was also important in funding this, and that wasn't mentioned earlier. So great job, everybody. Really a pleasure to watch, and a great product, and I can't wait to see where it goes.
And next up, we have Katie Ritter, who worked closely with the community in Rurutu, as well as Dr. Jenny Kahn, to explore sustainability of terraforming in French.
So I was lucky enough to work with Dr. Jennifer Kahn from the William Mary Anthropology Department, as well as the people of La Commune du Rurutu in French Polynesia, to conduct an analysis of the sustainability of terraforming on the island of Rurutu. So as the global population grows, that puts increased pressure on agriculture for higher production and more intensity, which increases impacts on biodiversity. This creates an increased need for sustainable agriculture to minimize those impacts, but also keep up with the needs of people for food from agriculture. This is especially true in areas with high levels of food insecurity and in places that have reliance on agriculture. So on Rurutu, which is a 12 square mile island in southern French Polynesia, taro is their staple crop. It is the basis of their economy, and it has been since people first arrived there several centuries ago. Previous existing scientific literature acknowledges that taro is a crop that has great potential to be grown sustainably, but the traditional methods of growing taro are still being used on Rurutu, and so the fact that they can do it with this high intensity, large spread, and continue to grow it there year after year for this many generations means that there's a lot of lessons we can learn from these methods for increasing sustainable agriculture on a larger scale. So this is Rurutu, and so I took soil and water samples from 6 fields there, as well as several areas off-site that had not been used for agriculture, just as a comparison, and also worked with the farmers whose fields these were to learn about their methods of growing and their ideas about sustainability and which methods they use that contribute to sustainability. So a big portion of what I was doing is looking at the practices that make their growing sustainable. So they have a very integrated agricultural system. It's not just taro, there's other crops that are intergrown in and around these fields, and they use those as natural ground cover and to feed livestock. There's a particular plant called nanam that's grown. It grows in the same fields as the taro, and it creates a ground cover that helps protect from weeds and such, but they also feed that to their livestock. So it kind of walks this line between a monoculture and polyculture, so it gets the benefits of both. And there's also different periods of fallow that are used that I looked at the effects of different time frames of use. I'll get into that a little more later. So one of the big things that I found that contributes to the sustainability of this form of agriculture is the ground cover that they use. So you can see in the picture up here, these stacks of coconut or banana leaves that are set to be spread out on a field that is due for planting. So they grow the coconut and banana trees on embankments in between the taro fields, and those are a food source, but then they also use the leaves as ground cover for their new crops. So this gets the usual benefits of mulching. It reduces temperature, it keeps moisture, and so they need less water. It helps prevent weeds and pests and increases growth, but then you also get the additional benefits of these being natural. They decompose, they put nutrients back into the soil. The other big practice that helps with sustainability is the use of fallow. So you can kind of see the fields in that picture are in different cycles of growth. Some of them are overgrown with weeds because they've been left fallow. The general fallow time that farmers told me was somewhere between 6 months and 2 years. And this allows for soil to recover from high intensity agriculture. But the general fallow time used there is a short to seasonal fallow, the 6 months or 2 years. And that's generally in scientific literature, general agriculture associated with high intensity. It's not a very long fallow time. So for them to be able to have this level of sustainability while still using such a short fallow time really indicates the sustainability of their practices. So I have soil and water samples from all of my sites. I'm currently working on analysis of my soil data and kind of looking at the level of impact of different stages of use to determine the best practices to the most sustainable agriculture there. I have a graph of my preliminary water data, which thanks to Dr. Lahani from the IIC for helping me put that together. So can kind of see some patterns that are to be expected of slight impact, lower levels of nitrogen downstream of agricultural systems, higher levels of phosphorus upstream. Those are both nutrients that are used a lot by plants in agriculture. So that's kind of expected, but it's not a very high level of impact, which is an indicator of fairly sustainable agriculture in the long run. So overall, knowing that these practices are contributing to sustainability and help the community of Rurutu having baseline analysis of sustainability and practices that make their agriculture sustainable and move forward in continuing to have sustainable agriculture and meet the goals that they have for sustainability. But then we can also use this to build sustainable agriculture on a larger scale. So in my research, I found that there is a farm in North Carolina that is looking at growing taro in the southeastern United States as a way to help combat food insecurity as sustainable crops. So looking at a sustainability analysis for this to determine how that can be implemented on a global scale is becoming increasingly important. Je veux dire merci à la commune de Rurutu. I also would like to thank Dr. Jennifer Kahn and her lab for their support and their help, the entire IIC team for just being so wonderful. Dr. Randy Chambers in the Keck lab, who, as well as Professor Jeff Moy in the chemistry department for helping me with my soil analysis, which is still ongoing. And the William Mary Center for Geospatial Analysis for helping me with my mapping and for lending me a GPS unit to take to Rurutu with me.
So Dr. Jenny Kahn sent a quick reflection. Jenny, if you're able to join us over Zoom, feel free to unmute and Robbie, and I'll read it here. Given that the large majority of Rurutuans are fishers and farming folk, and the wetland irrigated taro is their most celebrated crop, Katie's analysis of soil and water nutrients is highly important for this island community. While most taro cultivation on the island is carried out in a traditional, non-invasive manner, some farmers have adopted Western-style techniques like mulching with cardboard or newspaper. There is concern in the community that the chemicals on the cardboard and newspaper might leach into the water systems. These data will provide the Rurutuan community with important indicators of the resilience of their agricultural techniques and new agricultural complexes that were farmed in a traditional manner. This can be used in the future to compare with terraces farmed on non-traditional manners in order to provide the community with actionable data to examine their subsistent agricultural practices. As such, Katie's project has great importance both for the Rurutuan community and their larger island population, including politicians and the Council of Elders, as well as Western scientists. Thank you so much. Gankulek was closely with the Mongolian Conservation Initiative to explore ways to promote grassland conservation and the livelihoods of herders in Mongolia.
All right, how's everyone doing?
So my name is Ninjin Gankulek, and
This summer, I had the pleasure to work with the Mongolian Conservation Initiative, where I got to help promote the grassland conservation and herd immunity. And I had the opportunity to go back to my home country and yeah, so the project I worked on is part of the herder-led rangeland management strategy. So summarizing the herders' perspectives to help them come up with solutions that can balance the ecosystem and and grassland ecosystems protect biodiversity and support livelihoods of many communities in the world, especially pasture nomadic herders. Unfortunately, these grassland ecosystems are one of the most vulnerable to climate change, land development, and the expansion of mining, especially in Mongolia. This is very true, and there is a need to look at the social and ecological dimensions. So objectives. During the summer, I had to interview the herders about declining water resources, and using a water test strip, I got to go to the wells and springs that the herders told me about that they use, and I tested it, the quality and the availability and how it can change over time and how it's changing over time. Here. Yes, this is a video, but I specifically focused on water resources when I was at ICNAR, and ICNAR supports a lot of biodiversity and the livelihood, so it's really important. Water is a really important resource, and there's been a decline in the past couple of decades, and has impacted the environment and communities negatively, and so it shows the importance of considering the social and ecological dimension. Here you can see the herder's explanation for the decrease in water resources. According to the survey, around 61% of the herders noticed the shift in water resources, and when I asked them why, a lot of them mentioned mining, climate change, and livestock number increase as the reasoning why. And so because of the decrease in the water resources, it's affecting the herders very where it's very difficult to manage their herds, and there's also a lack of resources for everyone. And here you can see the herder suggestions to increase the water resources. And a lot of them said to restore and improve the current springs, grow trees, and decrease the number of livestock, and so on. But around 23% replied that they don't know. And I think this shows the importance of this project, where we'll work hand in hand and come up with solutions. And here we have my water test data. And this one is looking at the alkalinity level, and the orange arrows there indicate or show the springs and wells that are most frequently used. And in the test, it was found that the alkalinity was 0, which is not good, because it could lead to more corrosive water and could pose potential health effects and concerns. So in summary, in ICNAR, herders said that the decrease in water resources affect their livelihoods, and it's supported by the trend in the ecological data. And so the next step would be to work with the herders to come up with solutions to promote the water resilience in their livelihoods. And to the broader community, conservation community, this project demonstrates the importance of integrating the social and ecological dimensions to address conservation challenges. And also it's important to, think about take into consideration the ones who are most affected by it. So in this case, it would be the herders. And I would just like to thank the Mongolian Conservation Initiative and the IIC, especially Erica, who really helped me a lot with this and gave us a lot of support.
Right, given the time difference, the Mongolian Conservation Initiative sent this statement. We, the staff of the Mongolian Conservation Initiative, have been very grateful to work with Ninjin on this project. It's been an absolutely fantastic experience. Grassland degradation in Mongolia as a result of overgrazing and climate change is a major threat to the persistence of wildlife species and natural resources needed to support nomadic herding families at Icknart. Without intervention, natural water sources at Icknart continue to be damaged. Thus, Ninjin's help was incredibly valuable, and we plan to start management actions based on her results. We greatly appreciate the opportunity for this applied and integrative conservation science component by William and Mary, and it will be followed by science-based protected area management actions in Mongolia. Next up, we have Alex Ferentinos, who worked in close collaboration with the Oceanic Society to explore linkages between wildlife experiences and behavior change.
Thank you, Erica. So as she said, over the past year, I've been working with Oceanic Society to figure out how we can leverage the awe-inspiring experience that is whale watching into successful behavior change. And so this is a thing that a lot of ecotourism operators need to do, but unfortunately, it's not always a successful thing. So this comes from a literature review on the subject, and on the x-axis are just the stages of behavior change that the study examined. So beginning with knowledge, so when people learn about a problem, and ending with the ultimate behavior change to solve that problem. And on the y-axis, just the number of studies that the authors are able to find. So as you can see, this declines pretty dramatically over time. And so to solve this problem, a lot of recent work in the field has been focused around a thing called post-experience support, or PES. And what it intends to do is to continue to communicate and engage with people after their trip and hold them at that emotional high they're at immediately after it ends. And because of this, we made our main objective, identifying whether or not providing PES would lead to behavior change, and to suggest where Oceanic Society and other ecotourism organizations should invest in order to maximize their impact. And so to accomplish these objectives, we made up a research project composed of interviews with tourists, a literature review, and surveys. So the surveys were intended to measure behavior change, first being given as a post immediately after people's trips. And then the tourists were divided into either a treatment group, which did have the PES, and a control group, which did not. And then 6 weeks later, they were given a delayed post to measure the differences. And so the significant difference that we found was that the control and treatment differed in regards to whether or not they still felt like they were part of the community devoting to reducing plastic use. So treatment continued to have that feeling over time, whereas the control group had dropped back down to their normal levels before the trip. And this indicates, but in other measures like behavior change or the connection to nature, there were not any significant differences that we were able to find. And another interesting part of the survey to us was when we sort of turned the question around with respondents and asked them what they believed it would take for them to change their behavior. And so the two main things that we got from this were first, that people believe being provided with what we classified as intellectual information. So what are the problems? What can they do about them? Would trigger them to act on these behaviors. And the second was if society changed to favor these behaviors, so that the right choice was the easy choice for people to take in order to protect the oceans. And so this was interesting to us because a lot of what we provided could be classified as intellectual information. But as you saw, it failed to have that behavioral impact we said it would. So we think that the reason for this disconnect can be found in the results of the literature review. And so as I was doing my literature review, one thing that stood out to me was that in all the studies on whale watching and behavior change I was able to find, there was a consistent lack of success in changing people's behavior, whereas other ecotourism experiences had varying amounts of it. And so as I finished my literature review, I was able to piece together this sort of spatial and temporal model of behavior change and how those aspects affected in ecotourism. And so for space, it's how close are people able to get to these animals or environments? and whether or not they're in the same sort of medium as them, so air versus water, for example. And for time, it's not only how long they're able to spend in that area or with these creatures in order to be acted on by the guides and the environment itself, but what the length of time is between that experience and when these requested behaviors occur. And so both of these features ultimately lead to greater behavior change if they're able to be minimized. But in cases like whale watching, obviously there's problems where people that are far from the whales for safety, and the whales are in the water, when people are up on air, and for time, and able to be there for so long. So what this allows us to conclude is that for oceanic society and other ecotourism operators, they should aim to use their interventions for behavior change on trips that best match this model. And for oceanic society, in particular, the global trips, which are anywhere from a week to several weeks, which would fit this example. And for areas where their trips are unable to trigger these changes that they're looking for, OS and other community and other organizations should look to establish community partnerships where they can encourage those behaviors that people say that they would like to be able to take advantage of in their own community. So thank you to the Oceanic Society for providing this opportunity and everyone else who provided their support.
Thank you so much, Alex. So I would like to invite Lindsay Mosher, who's joining us via Zoom, to unmute and on Alex's project.
Hi all. Yes, I'd just like to extend a huge thanks to Alex for his research and his creativity when, if we were needing to get more survey results, he was very persistent and just great with trying to find different opportunities to analyze the passengers on our trips, as well as the communications that we were delivering to everyone after the fact. This was an extension of a previous research project where we had the idea of the methodologies that we wanted to deliver on the trips, but after the fact didn't have the bandwidth to have a more robust kind of metrics and evaluation program. So this was really helpful to analyze and do a deeper dive into the different projects that we've been doing on Whale Watch, as well as already this trajectory we've been doing with Oceanic Society for our longer term trips. So it was good to see that the results that Alex had were consistent with our future plans, and just a huge thank you to William and Mary. I think this is an awesome project and a really great opportunity for students and organizations alike.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. And next up, we have Will Florentino, who worked in close collaboration with the River Otter Ecology Project to explore how organizations can engage underrepresented audiences in conservation.
What's up, y'all? How's everyone doing? We're halfway through. Everyone's still with us? My name is Will, and I was in the Bay Area over the summer, trying to connect people to place, basically trying to understand through conservation action how to connect underserved communities with conservation action. And before we get into the experimental design, I kind of just wanted to talk about our region of interest. The Bay Area is known for its beautiful coastlines and stunning wildlife, but it's also the site of pretty significant racial and environmental injustices. Right? There exist communities of lower socioeconomic status, which are unfairly burdened by environmental and sociopolitical stressors. However, there's kind of a lack of emphasis on social services like public transportation that would potentially be able to connect poor communities to economic and conservation opportunities. So what we're seeing is that environmental nonprofits, especially smaller grassroots nonprofits, are struggling to be able to find connections between their goals and the needs of the underserved communities around the Bay Area. Right? And so I was working specifically with the nonprofit, the River Otter Ecology Project, which is an environmental nonprofit which does education, conservation, and community science. And this summer, I partnered with the ROAP to design a research project that's centered around finding these avenues through which environmental nonprofits could engage underserved communities in conservation actions that in ways that meet both community needs as well as nonprofit goals, right? And you see there's an otter because I was working with the River Otter Ecology Project. The way we did this was to survey two groups of students engaging in conservation activities. One of the groups did a robust 6-week conservation program, which included, farming, field work, like lessons, lectures, stuff like that. And the other group spent the afternoon on a ship, And they learned about the Bay Area's ecological history, and they learned about the importance of plankton, and the ship looked like a pirate ship. I went on it, it was awesome. And even though we had some pretty diverse groups, we found that across the board, the barriers to continued conservation action were pretty much similar, and we were able to break it down into these 4 main spheres. And these are quotes from the students that we surveyed. The first sphere was transportation. Obviously, especially in areas that the public transportation infrastructure is poor, it's kind of hard to get people from place to place, especially when these conservation actions happen in more areas that are concentrated on wildlife rather than in urban spaces. Another sphere was time. People are busy, they have school, they have work, they have things to do, right? People are tired. And so it's hard for them to cut out time in their day or in their weekend to commit themselves to driving out or busing out to an area that's far away, engaging in hours of conservation action, and then going back home to do whatever else they have to do. Another sphere that we found was important was funding, especially in areas of lower socioeconomic status. Funding is important, right? People are worried about housing and food, and they may not have time to take away from their time on making money to engage in conservation action. And the 4th main sphere was communication. Just being able to get that information out there. People didn't really exactly know what certain conservation actions looked like. They didn't know what they would be doing, and communication seemed to be very important in creating these connections with the communities. And so ultimately, through these 4 spheres of barriers, we were able to find 2 main possible solutions. The first would be integrative opportunities. That means like easily accessible conservation opportunities that blend sort of into the daily life of people. For example, like having a conservation table at a school or a community center where people are already at and don't have to take that much time out of their day and don't have to travel really far to be able to connect with these conservation actions. Another thing that goes into these integrative opportunities is like family or community-oriented opportunities that emphasize collaboration across people and across communities and across families, rather than bringing people outside of their community to engage in conservation action, bringing that conservation action to them, being able to engage them in their own setting, right? We also heard a lot of feedback that immersions involving wildlife and history were really popular, and basically creating interactive educational opportunities ended up being really important, and it kept students engaged and willing to come back and learn more. And the second possible solution we found was funded programs. Obviously, securing grants is really hard for small nonprofits, but ultimately across the board, it was really important for students and people to be able to make it worth their time, especially in these areas of lower socioeconomic status. So funded internships, funded programs, opportunities where there is a monetary incentive seem to be really popular. And before I finish out, I just wanted to take a moment to talk about considerations on like personal and ethical frameworks. I'm from the Bay Area, and I grew up only an hour south of the areas that we were studying. But the local experience is very, very different from what I'm used to, socially, culturally, and economically. So before I could even begin to do my research, I had to acknowledge my own biases and sort of do a lot of pre-research on ethical and cultural frameworks by which to guide my research. And that included, like talking to community leaders, talking to significant members of the community, and sort of just like hanging out with participants in like a non-research capacity in a way that like I was able to just connect with them as a person before I could do like actual science and data collection and stuff like that. And I think a big takeaway from my research beyond just our raw data is that it's really important both for researchers and nonprofits, especially small nonprofits who are trying to integrate themselves into the community, to sort of step back and let existing social infrastructure do its thing, right? Communities are ecosystems of themselves, and people have ways of knowing and doing and being that go beyond my own abilities and knowledge. So I think it was really important for me to be able to recognize my personal limits and be cognizant of where and when to step back and let these communities take over and take their place. And as a thank you, big shout out to my mentor, Dr. Ali Sabo, and our partners at the ROEP, Megan Isidore and Terrence Carroll. There are a lot of points in this project where I was struggling and they helped me through, and I really appreciate it for it. Thank you.
So I would like to invite Megan, who's an alum, Isadore from River Otter Ecology Project, to unmute and provide a short reflection on Will's report.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And Will, thank you for all your wonderful work this summer. We really loved working with you. We all learned a lot, I think. I think the best thing really about our partnership this summer and our partnership with the IIC is having someone to really help us put things that we've been working on for many years into a little bit of a context. And that's what Will did for us with this research and this paper. We're leaning in the directions and going in the directions that he's been talking about. But what we haven't had is someone very creative, very intelligent, and very eager to move forward and put it in words, put it into a plan, put it into a reasoned and excellent plan. And we love that. We can use that and we'll continue to use it. So it's been a lovely partnership. And thank you, IIC, and thank you, Will.
And next up, we have Grace Doe, who worked in close collaboration with the First Landing Seafood Company, faculty from BIMS and the Entrepreneurship Center here at William & Mary to explore business models that promote sustainable oyster aquaculture. Grace.
Hello, as Erica just said, I'm Grace, and this past year I've had the lovely opportunity to work with Dr. John Swaddle, Professor Graham Henshaw, and most importantly, our partner Bay McLaughlin at First Landing Seafood on our project, exploring innovative business models to expand oyster aquaculture and its benefits. So the first question you're probably asking yourself is, well, why oyster aquaculture? Hopefully, I'm not the first person to tell you this, but the Chesapeake Bay is not in the best conditions, and oysters are one of the main ways we've been looking to fix that. Oysters have this phenomenal ability to take in extra nutrients, extra phytoplankton, and filter out the water, leaving us with a cleaner bay. The next reason is that we want good seafood. In 2016, the US had a $16 billion seafood trade deficit, and the seafood market is only expected to grow. Market research shows that the demand for seafood will increase by 0.07% annually from 2021 to 2026. So we end at this place where we have something that's beneficial to the environment and something that's filling a market need. So this seems like it would be a pretty profitable venture. Going forward, I looked at two things. I wanted to create a business model that was beneficial to the environment, but also beneficial to the farmers who are farming these oysters. That led us to our business model known as the collective. The way the collective functions is that we would ask farmers to engage in a certain set of environmental sustainability standards. If farmers are able to engage in these standards, we'll then buy their oysters from them. We'll sell these oysters as the collective to restaurants and direct to consumers at a premium price due to their environmental sustainability. We then take that little extra money from the premium price and give it back to farmers in order for them to continue to have the money to invest in these sustainable practices. So with this idea, we then look to see, well, if it would work. The first question we asked is that are oyster eaters really willing to spend a little extra money on food that was grown sustainably? To answer this question, I went to the Williamsburg Farmers Market and I gave people a couple of scenarios. The first scenario I gave them was, well, would you rather buy a $12 oyster or a $15 oyster? Not surprisingly, most people chose the $12 option. I then asked them, well, would you rather buy a $12 wild oyster or a $15 farmed oyster? Again, people stuck with this $12 option. However, when I asked them whether or not they would buy a $12 wild oyster or a $15 sustainably farmed oyster, everyone was willing to spend, not everyone, but people were willing to spend that extra $3 on the sustainable oyster. So people are willing to pay a little extra money for some sustainable seafood. What about restaurants? Well, I interviewed a variety of restaurant owners and restaurant managers and asked them what they were looking for in vendors. Two things showed up. They wanted variety and they wanted ease of access. Luckily, the collective is able to provide these two things. The collective has the ability to contract or to buy oysters from multiple different farms. So you have that variety of taste profiles under one company, therefore providing that ease of access. So the next question we then asked was, well, can we create environmental guidelines that farmers are willing to participate in? Through some literature review, we came up with what we call the evidence-based management practices, or EBUMPs for short. These e-bumps are based off of management practices from a variety of different states' best practice manuals. They're divided into 3 sections. For simplicity, we have environmental, so direct impact, managerial, and social impacts. The great thing about pulling all of these e-bumps from different other best practice manuals is that there's a lot of them. So since we have a lot of these e-bumps, we ask that farmers don't engage in all of them, but rather we only require them to participate in a certain portion or a certain percentage. Therefore, farmers have the ability to choose what works best for their farm in order to decrease their negative impact and increase their positive benefit on the bay. So that leaves us here, where the front end of this business model, selling the oysters, seems to work. We have restaurants and consumers who are willing to pay a little extra, and we have a company that's willing to provide what restaurants need. And then on the back end of things, we were able to create these environmental sustainability standards that farmers can participate in order to have a better impact in their farming. Our next steps moving forward are to further, prove these environmental sustainability standards. So showing that farmers are in fact willing to participate in them and that we are not asking too much of them. I would love to thank the McLaughlin family at First Landing Seafood for providing me the opportunity to work with them. They're a wonderful family to talk with and work with. Also, Dr. Swaddle and Professor Henshaw and the rest of the IIC for helping me out throughout this project. And of course, everyone I interviewed. This project required speaking to a lot of different people. So I'm forever grateful for everyone being willing to talk to me and provide me with some information. So thank you all.
All right, I would like to welcome alum Bay McLaughlin, as well as Karen Henshaw, to unmute to provide a short reflection on Grace's project. I'll start with you, Bay.
Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Grace, so much for supporting this. It's obviously been a lot of work. I feel like the first couple of presentations, the first thing I thought about, Grace, was I'm really sorry you just got to go hang out with me and my family on the boats and not go to like overseas somewhere or to the Bay Area or something crazy. But I know we had a couple of fun trips. I appreciate you coming down and bearing with all of us as we've been trying to figure out how do we support an industry that our family's been in for almost 20 years and something that I started learning when I was probably 7 years old, over 30 years ago. And the challenge that Grace helped us really look into was how do we support what we hope to be a resurgence in small businesses that can not only help the environment here locally, but also create a thriving small business culture on the water that allows farmers to do good by the environment and hopefully create kind of an additional, more modern farming practice that is sustainable at the same time. The challenge that we found as a small business is that the barriers to entry are increasing, litigation and the legal kind of expectations are higher than ever before. So Grace really helped us try to figure out if we can figure this out, how can we help other farmers figure it out? And can we get the backing of local restaurants and consumers to support these small farmers in creating these higher sustainability practices? And also kind of as a result, creating more robust and durable small farming industry on the Chesapeake. So really, really appreciate that. There's lots of work to be done from here, but we have an amazing start because of Grace and all the hard work and all the different mentors that have supported her and us in going through this process. So we really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Bay. And Graham, if you'd like to unmute and provide a reflection.
Sure. Nice work, Grace. I have to say that this is just the type of thing that we really like to see at the Entrepreneurship Center, where we have entrepreneurship at the intersection of some other meaningful challenge in the world. We've started to try to aim entrepreneurship at more significant problems. And this was just a great example of sustainable development in two different ways. So there was sustainability aimed at the bay, so the environmental sustainability. But through the business model lens, there was also sustainability looked at from that perspective, from the business perspective. Making livelihoods for these small businesses is critically important for this to work as an overall model. So this just turned out to be one of those fantastic examples of the intersection of multiple disciplines. And I think that's what makes the IIC really great. And so we had a really great time at the center collaborating and thinking through the challenges. And as they said, I think you've gotten this to a really great place. There is work to be done, but you've taken the ball really far, and I look forward to seeing what Bay's family and others do with the work that you've created. You should feel proud of that.
And next up, we have Van Monday, who worked in close collaboration with Prisma to explore innovative communication strategies for conservation NGOs. Thank you so much, Van.
Thanks, Erica. Hi, everyone. I'm Van Monday, and I worked in collaboration with Dr. Fernando Galeano Rodriguez and the team over at Prisma in El Salvador to develop a novel approach to science communication. So together with Prisma, we identified a main challenge, and this challenge is that there is a gap between the research being conducted by conservation scientists and the affected groups and intended audiences that research is supposed to reach. So the goal of science communication writ large is to bridge that gap. Crimdale Bridge, I thought it might be kind of funny. And it comes from this. Researchers are not trained in communication, they're trained in research. But because of this, and especially including considering the capabilities of different NGOs, especially smaller ones, communication is often overlooked. And because of that, information doesn't reach intended audiences clearly or at all. So working with Prisma, we developed three main research objectives. The first was to develop a holistic literature review that understands what comprises effective science communication and why it works. The second was to look at those communications and practices, looking at case studies of key important organizations in the United States that effectively use science communications. And the third was to develop a standardized process. And I'm going to come back to this later because this is really important. So as you see here, reiterating my methods, the literature review and case studies were conducted over the course of the summer. I'm currently summarizing my final report, and then we'll be delivering a list of recommendations for best practices in science communication to Prisma by the end of the year. These are the key findings of my research. They're twofold. The first is that a co-production of knowledge is key to allowing collaboration to thrive in conservation organizations. Co-production of knowledge involves community-based groups and affected communities in every step of the process, from beginning to middle to end, rather than just in the communications part of the process. The second, which feeds into this, is transdisciplinary collaboration. I've been lucky enough to work at the IIC, which fosters that at William & Mary, but it allows for the integration of more perspectives into scientific research and SciComm in general. All of this together leads to more inclusive science communications practices, which are thereby more effective. So these are three of the main strategies that I identified that are potential best practices for organizations to use. The use of direct and indirect communications being things like newsletters, whereas indirect communications are things like social media. Dialogues and the integration of different perspectives allow community members to have a voice where maybe they previously didn't. And the third is this broad idea of upstream engagement. You may be like, what is that? Is that about fish? No, I mean, it could be, but not in this presentation. Upstream engagement is the idea that social media is not an ends to a means, but it's a means to an end. It encourages people to get more involved with the scientific process at that beginning stages so we can have a better co-production knowledge. The second point goes back to that third research objective. There is no one size fits all flowchart. I wish there was. I wish I would have been able to create that, but it's so dependent on the project and the organization. And so there may be best practices, and there certainly are, but there is no one size fits all approach. And the final thing is a caveat that I really, really want to include in this presentation. These are concretely European American ideals. As a white person studying this in the United States, that's the research that I had access to, and that seems to be most of the research in the field. So there is potential for future research here in what science communications should look like in other parts of the world, and specifically in Central and South America. I want to give a big shout out to the team over at Prisma. Nelson, Susan, Manuel, Rafa, Ileana, and Deanna were all so wonderful to work with, and I've learned so much. And Fernando, for all of your help, thank you so much to everyone.
Then I would like to invite Susan Candell from Prisma to unmute and provide a reflection.
Hi there. First of all, I'm calling from El Salvador. I'm in El Salvador. This is where we're situated. We're based out of, and we work on a Central American level. First, I want to thank William and Mary and also Fernando for putting us in touch with Van. It was a really good work and helpful, and maybe explain a little bit more about what we were asking him to do. Prisma is not a traditional conservation organization. Really, we work with communities, and we're more of a it's a program for research on development and community, and it's where that crosses together. So we work with indigenous communities, we work with Afro-descendant communities, we work with campesino groups, And the whole point here is how these communities are the ones that are really providing, rural communities are providing the possibility for climate resilience and for other pathways to development that aren't the traditional business as usual. And part of the communication problem we have is, you know, rural communities know that. They're out there on the front lines, but it's interesting that here in Central America, that environmental movements tend to be urban and very disconnected from that. So it was also like, how do we bridging these communications about how we talk about climate change, adaptation, and all that. And we had specifically asked, and this was really helpful on this literature review that Van was doing, was understanding also, for example, how did organizations like Black Lives Matter go from being a individual movement that could reach other audiences? And so that was part of like what we were talking about here when he was saying about involving. So while we do, when we create communications, we're involved with the communities in the rural areas, we're not so involved with the down end, the other end of it. Like, okay, how do we reach young people in urban areas, or how do we connect that to international audiences if this is an issue? So just, I wanted to kind of put in that caveat. And it was really helpful because also, I think it was really useful that Van got creative about like some of the things to look at, like how you communicate about the virus, the pandemic, and how, you know, different things, how you bridge these types of gaps. So I just want to say that. And out of this, actually, we're coming up with a new kind of collaboration with Fernando about how to, in the future work, decolonize kind of the way that we speak about some of the practices, you know, agroecology or community forestry, which are foreign words to the audiences or the communities we work with, who have other, you know, paradigms. Just that's it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. All right, and next up, we have Viviana Morones, who worked in close collaboration with the Biological Monitoring Group of Milpalta, the National I'm going to mess this up, I'm sorry, I'm practicing so many times, but Autonomous University of Mexico and the Autonomous University of the State of Mexico, as well as fellow student Jordan Bryan, to explore the process of community collaboration on conservation research. Welcome, Viviana.
Hello, everyone. So today I'm going to talk about the process of community collaboration in conservation research. My name is Viviana Mirones, and I am a senior here at William & Mary. And this past summer, I spent a month in Mexico in a small community in San Pablo, where I worked in the Milpalta forest with a local brigade group alongside my mentor, Dr. Fernando Galeano Rodriguez. And so before we begin, the original purpose of the project was tools for better land management of natural areas at the community level. A really, really long name. But basically, we were aimed at creating a field guide that would help the local conservation group there called El Grupo de Monitoreo Biológico de Milpalta, which was a local conservation group there that basically worked around the forests and just basically helping with reforestation projects around the forests. And the research team basically spent a month in Mexico collecting data through identification, through our methodology, phytosociology, which I'll go a little bit more in depth on what that means. What was really cool about this was that I was not a plant biologist before this. So Dr. Martha Case, a plant biologist here on campus, was really, really helpful with that, alongside the student researcher, Jordan Bryan. When we went there, I spent the semester learning a little bit more about it, so that once we got there, I would know a little bit of background on how to identify plants. But it completely changed because during our time there, I realized that the research was more than just a linear line to our end goal, but it was more than just a field guide. And so one major thing that I had realized was that it was important to meet the immediate needs of the group. And an example of that was we had gotten there and realized that we needed media training for the rest of the brigade and ourselves. And so we took that opportunity to use the privileged funds and resources that we as an institution had, and made a whole media training there where we created videos that would make the work from the brigade more visible. So we elevated their work, made it visible, helped them create that video alongside the fact that we also had a field guide. And on top of that, I learned a lot more than just how to create a field guide as well. So to briefly go over, phytosociology was our method that we used. This is basically a plant classification system that was aimed at understanding the relationship between plant communities and the environment. So instead of looking at individual plant species, we looked at plant communities. And we basically took plots of lands, like sampling units, and we took them as representative areas. So what was really great about this and what was really beneficial to our research was that it was easy for communities to perform. So overall, we really wanted to create a sustainable project that once we left was still there afterwards. And this was ultimately the best option for us. So this basically focused on characteristics in the plots, such as dominance, abundance, and coverage of plant community species. But what was really good about this was that we were able to integrate collaboration almost every step of the way. We did not know what phytosociology was before we left. And once we got there is when we got our training. So it was really a step-by-step process where we learned together, we made mistakes together, and we learned about phytosociology together. So at all steps, we were collaborating and creating knowledge together. So there was no time where we knew more than they did, because we all learned it at the same time too. And so just to broaden this a little bit more, a couple of reflections that I had throughout my time there, hearing their stories, eating dinners with them, sharing our life experiences and stuff. What was really great was I was able to hear about their traditional knowledge they had, whether that was on plants or whether that was on their identity as original people in Milpa Alta and in San Pablo. And something that I saw taking this approach was this contrast between traditional knowledge and academic/scientific knowledge. So oftentimes the brigade group would have really valuable and powerful knowledge on plant species and how they use them in their day-to-day lives. And when I would turn to any William and Mary staff, really, it would be kind of contrasting because a lot of what they knew didn't align with the scientific name of something. And so I saw a really large contrast there. And I think this exists in many conservation research programs. And so I think it's important to consider the ways that traditional knowledge and knowledge created in communities is just as valuable and powerful as any academic and scientific knowledge. And we need to work on ways to incorporate this better so that we can take it into consideration in the rest of our conservation research process. And then collaboration was a really big part of this entire project. So in the pictures, you will see the brigade group kind of taking pictures of Jordan and I as we were plant pressing something. And this was part of the media training, but it's kind of like a twist on it where we were also being looked at and being like learned at as well. And it was a really great way of collaborating and creating knowledge together where we had open discussions where we really just had dialogue throughout the whole process. And lastly, something that was really important was I learned about their personal lives as well as their professional lives. And it was really interesting to see the barriers to many environmental defenders in their community, a lack of social nets that would prevent them from supporting their families or made it really challenging for them to continue this type of work. You know, I feel like we as students read about it, but to actually be there and listen to their struggles was really like emotional. And so then I took the time to like really reflect on my own positionality in all of this. So reflecting on who created these systems of oppression, especially in a place such as Mexico, which still has a lot of you know, like there's a lot of things that continue to exist there because of colonial forces such as the US. And such as institutions like William and Mary. So it's really important that we reflect on our own positionality and our own privileges as an institution, as well as, you know, where we're from, as well as how do we contribute to these. So the traditional versus academic and scientific knowledge is an excellent way of seeing what kind of knowledge do we value and what kind of knowledge should we begin to value. And I just wanted to thank you to Dr. Fernando Galeano Rodriguez for everything. The IC and yeah, like the brigade group, they were just really amazing. And I had a special shout out. I don't know if they're here, but just un agradecimiento muy grande. Muchas gracias por todo, and thank you so much.
So Bibiana doesn't know this, but the brigade sent a video thanking her and providing a reflection on the project. I'm also going to invite Jürgen Hoth, who is the co-chair for the North America's UN 2026 International Year of Rangeland and Pastoralist, a professor at the University of Ottawa, and a member of the directive board of the Conservation Fund of the Volcanic Belt, Central Mexico, who I met a year ago, who really made this connection and who's going to also unmute and provide a brief reflection. But we'll start with the video from the brigade. And then I'll invite Jürgen to unmute, and you were gracious enough to volunteer to translate that a bit for us and then provide a reflection. Thank you so much, Jürgen.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for the invite, and congratulations to you all with all your amazing presentations and your amazing work worldwide, supported by IAC. It's well, basically what we just saw is, and what we have right now in the screen is the Brigada, the Brigade of Biological Monitoring, which is a family-based, community-based organization, 3 families that have been working and fighting, I would say, even for the last good 15, 20 years for not only for their nature, but for being listened, even against the government and NGOs and universities wanting to use their ecosystem as a playing field without really understanding the ecology of the place. So they have stopped reforestation projects, they have stopped afforestation projects, and so on and so on. Very courageously, because frequently they have even put their life at stake. So as Viviana just mentioned, and you did a great job as well, they have gathered, they have amassed their own direct experience and knowledge by working in the place, but then also what they inherited from their culture. This is an indigenous community among 100 others that live surrounding in the mountains surrounding Mexico City, and upon which, and see the amazing importance, more than 25 million people depend on the 250,000 hectares that they administrate, and they are forgotten, they are not listened. So through this experience, on the one hand, we just saw the brigade thanking for having been listened, for having been trained also, very much with the support of Martha Case and Bibiana and Jordan, having been there and accompanied by the perspectives that Fernando shared, in collaboration with peer scientists in the region. And so here's what the real challenge is. How can we treat each other as peers? How can we help each other to become peers? And so that hopefully within the next 10, 15 years, we can have this community be the part of the administrators, part of the entrepreneurs, and I listened to several of your really interesting presentation about this, how the community can have such a key role. How can they be the managers, the sustainable users, and not only up there in the mountains, but also from the watershed perspective. The bottom part of the watershed is Mexico City. They occupy the middle and upper part. And here's where the next step, the next challenge is, how can we bring back to life the pre-Hispanic knowledge of working on terracing, in terraces, to provide food, to produce food. Based on that ancient knowledge, how can we meet current and future needs? So that's the challenge, and that's why I'm so honored to having worked with Erica, with Fernando, and Bibiana, of course, Martha, Jordan, and the brigade, the family, Martinez family, that how the teaming up has been amazing. We could not have a better partner than IIC and the William and Mary. I think together we have really planted a seed, and I look forward to helping this seed to reach fruition. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Helena Yin, who worked in close collaboration with Conservation International to explore the linkage between Ecosystem Integrity Index and the critical natural assets. Helena, thank you.
Hi, I'm Helena, and this year I had the amazing opportunity to work with Dr. Fernando Collins from Conservation International. Our topic surrounds the concept of nature's contribution to people, and we did a study on a comparison of ecosystem integrity index and critical natural assets to answer the question, how correlated are they? I want to start by some backgrounds and relevance of our research. So the concept of nature's contribution to people refers as the contribution of living nature to people's quality of life. It entails not only material goods such as food, timber, but also regulating effects and spiritual and cultural inspirations. The nature's contribution to people, NCP, is critical to our society. However, human activities have been negatively impacting the natural world, bringing rapid decline of the global environment. The decline of biodiversity and ecosystems severely threatened NCP. We want to better understand the spatial relationship between nature's contributions and the level of impactness of ecosystem. We used the map of ecosystem integrity index to represent the human influence to ecosystems, and the map of critical natural assets to represent the nature's contribution to human. So we start by asking the questions and define our objective as, is there any spatial correlation between the maps of critical natural assets and ecosystem integrity index? And then can we use EI as a proxy of CNA? And for areas with small correlations and areas with high correlation, is there any patterns? So our key findings are listed here. First, there is actually an inverse relationship between the two indices, but there exist places with complex patches of correlation have a stronger correlated relationship between the two indices, and places with where both high and CNA appears can be areas of potential focus and crucial to understand how the change of ecosystem integrity could affect nature's contribution to people. I will dive deeper into this later. So next, I want to talk about the method we use. First of all, what is exactly the two data sets? So the ecosystem integrity index measures the extent to which the composition, structure, and function of an ecosystem fall within their natural range of variation. And here are a list of the inputs that goes into this data set. And then there's the critical natural assets, which summarize the most important ecosystem for providing nature's contribution to people. There are a total of 12 inputs into this data set. So briefly speaking, our method is to reclass each of the two maps into 3 different levels according to their data distribution, and combine the two maps using bivariate color map to visualize the two indices. So this is the global aggregated map of ecosystem integrity index reclassed into 3 levels. And this is the global aggregated critical natural assets map reclassed to 3 different levels. And this is the combined output of our research. So first of all, there's the inverse relationship between the two. More detailedly speaking, the low performing areas with high ecosystem integrity index occupies the most land. It's around 42.7 million kilometer squares. Areas with low values of critical natural assets and medium level of ecosystem integrity index rank the second, areas with both high CNA and high EI occupies the smallest land. So we conclude that EI cannot be used as proxy of CNA, and a lot of it is actually expected because of the way CNA data set is made. It is aggregated by population, which of course pose threats to ecosystems. There is concentrated areas of high CNA and low EI in Eastern and Southern Asia. And in Europe, we see a rather simple composition of CNA and EI. It's either high in CI or high in EI. So, but there are definitely places where there is complex patches of lands that we are more in. Especially for the two pictures on the left, which is Australia and New Zealand and North America, there's definitely a higher correlation between the two indices. And for to the pictures on the right, which is South America and Central Africa, we see a very interesting patterns here. Areas of patches of high performing lands extend into areas of really high EI areas, and those patches that intersects appear to be both high in EI and CNA. They are neighbored by those areas of high CNA and low EI, and then high CNA and low EI, and soon diminish to these gray areas with that those ecosystems are unable to provide benefits. So we see from that degraded ecosystems are still able to provide contributions to human society, but beyond certain thresholds, such contributions rapidly decrease. A researcher we had a conversation with points out that there are a lot of these areas these areas with both high EI and high CNA are, especially in South America, are deforestation plots. So we think closely study and monitor all these areas can reveal us more information about how EI and nature's contribution to human are related. And if such threshold does exist, and what is exactly these thresholds? And I want to give my thanks to Conservation International and my instructor, Dr. Pamela Collins. I want to thank to Institute for Information and my instructor, Professor Robert Rose. And I want to especially thanks to our collaborator from United Nations Program Center and Dr. Javier of the UNEP Museums team for providing the EI data sets.
Thank you so much, Helena. So Dr. Pam Collins, who's now with the Applied Sciences program at NASA, and who is Helena's mentor on the program, I think is trying to join us via Zoom, but is having some connection issues. So send me some feedback to paraphrase here. Basically wanted to thank you, Helena, for all of your incredible work. You obviously took these global data sets and you looked at trends at very large scales, and then were able to really look at these large scale data sets and come up with some really interesting recommendations. And she really appreciated your professionalism, your ability to navigate the challenges of dealing with large data sets like this, and how innovative you were with really thinking about the applications of some of this data at this scale to CI and with other groups that can use this data. So Helena, thank you so much for all of your hard work. And yeah, we'll give, if she is able to connect, we'll give her a chance to unmute when she's able to connect. But thank you so much, Helena. Great. Next up, we have Anna Lowe, who works in close collaboration with the Center for Sustainability in the Philippines. And I saw that they have joined us, even though it's what, 3 or 4 in the morning there, which is incredible. As well as a student, Darlene Batuga, as well as faculty members from the Western Philippines University on a project exploring the opportunities for directly funding Indigenous peoples and local communities.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I know this has been very long. My name is Anna. I am a current junior here at William & Mary, and my project is looking at breaking down barriers that exist for foundations and NGOs that are trying to directly fund conservation initiatives that are led by Indigenous peoples and local communities, which will be referred to as IPLCs throughout this presentation. As Erica said, this project is in collaboration with Center for Sustainability PH, which is a small nonprofit based out of Palawan in the Philippines. Darlene, who is a student from Western Philippines University, and some faculty members from Western Philippines University as well. So this diagram right here is a simplified flow of funds from funders through NGOs and to the IPLC communities. Right now, a lot of the funds are going through intermediary NGOs, as you can see in the middle, rather than directly to the communities, as you can see by the arrow on the far right. There are barriers that exist at each of these connection points shown by the arrows, making it really difficult to get direct unrestricted funds to communities who are doing this frontline conservation work. IPLCs are crucial stewards of Earth's natural lands, which is why directly funding their projects is really important. Jerlene's side of the project is largely looking at the IPLCs, as she will be conducting interviews with Indigenous communities that Center for Sustainability works with, whereas my side of the project is largely dealing with the funders and the NGOs, and the trends that I'm discussing in this presentation came from interviews with people who work for various foundations and conservation NGOs of all sizes. So the first trend that I want to discuss is one of the biggest barriers that I found from interviews, which is barriers that are stemming from reporting requirements. Funders impose a lot of reporting requirements on NGOs when they're giving money to them, and some of these are unavoidable, such as ones coming from the IRS, but the NGOs still have to deal with them when they're using the money. When NGOs then partner with IPLCs, the requirements then fall on the IPLC groups to deal with. Small NGOs and nonprofits with minimal staff and IPLCs do not have the capacity nor the time to deal with super excessive reporting requirements. And additionally, IPLC groups are not used to receiving and managing large sums of money, which can compound on the problems that they're facing when they're trying to comply with these requirements. My suggestion here is twofold. In the short term, have NGOs work alongside the communities on managing funds and dealing with the logistical barriers, while in the long term, having NGOs and foundations work on decreasing their reporting requirements wherever possible. The next trend that I want to discuss is one dealing with relationships and trust. So most NGOs express that they want to form relationships with their partners before they agree to fund them, and then they want to keep these partnerships up for a really long time. Some even prioritize this to the point that they don't have an open call to applications to give out funding, and the only way that they'll take new partnerships is if they're recommended to them through their connections, such as board members or other partner organizations. And additionally, nearly every NGO had a strong preference towards funding long-term projects over short-term projects. And while funding and forming long-term relationships and funding these long-term projects is really, really important, it does limit the pool of IPLC groups that are able to then apply and receive funding for new projects. My suggestion here is to have NGOs make more efforts to form partnerships with IPLC groups that they haven't worked with before. This can start off as simple as putting out an application for new funding, and then put more trust in the people that have been stewards of this land and have the connections to this land for thousands of years. Finally, once funders and NGOs agree to fund IPLCs, the question is raised of what is actually being funded. So this summer, I had the privilege of being in the Philippines for a month, and I got to help out Center for Sustainability with one of their projects where we were taking data on the endangered Almasica tree in the Quezon region of Palawan in order to take data to make Quezon a protected area in the future. And some of the things that we had to be funded for this project were transportation to get to the area. We needed food, we needed camping supplies, we needed payments for the indigenous peoples that were taking us up the mountain, payments for the indigenous peoples that were helping us take the data. We needed GPS, GIS equipment. This is a non-extensive list, and these are just the basics. But through my interviews with people who work for CS, they were expressing to me that their projects would be aided greatly if they were given unrestricted funds. Restricted funds are ones that can only go towards specific things, such as camera traps, whereas unrestricted funds can go towards whatever the users need. Small NGOs and some large ones expressed in their interviews that ideally there would be unrestricted funds, and this is especially important as projects change and adapt, as all of them do, or when problems arise and you need to fund things that were not initially in the budget. My suggestion here is to have funders and NGOs start moving towards giving unrestricted funds wherever possible. And where this is not possible, make sure that they're funding all necessary costs of the project, including indirect costs and overhead costs. Again, they need to be putting more trust in the IPLC groups that they were going to be using the funding as they say they will. These people have been on the land for thousands of years doing what they do. This presentation did not cover everything that was said in interviews, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I want to give a special thank you to the staff of Center for Sustainability, members of Western Philippines University, and Jerlene for hosting me this summer. For the people that are here right now in the middle of the night watching me present this, and for their help with the project, the members of the IIC for their incredible mentorship, and to everyone who took the time to speak with me for this project.
Right, so Robert, the lead of operations for Center for Sustainability, sent a statement. And also Florcel Collego, I see that you're there. If you would like to unmute and provide a reflection, please feel free, although I'll read this now, no pressure. I know it's very late there. As a small project-based organization working through protecting and preserving forests here in Palawan, it's important to know and understand the needs and requirements of funders and the community partners when it comes to giving and receiving funds. With Anna and Geraldine's research study, it will help CS to be more aware of what needs to improve when it comes to writing a grant proposal and how to make the project more successful together with the partnership with the community. It will not only help CS, but as well as other NGOs here in Palawan since we are working with them. Thank you so much, Anna. Thank you. And Flora, I'll give you a chance to unmute if you would like to, but I would like, while we're doing that, I'd like to thank Darlene Basinga and Dr. Glenn Sopsa from Western Philippines University for their collaboration on this joint project. Stay tuned for Darlene's presentation on the Indigenous communities mentioned of this project. We have two more presentations. Thank you for sticking with us. So now it's my pleasure to welcome up Dr. Mara DeSenta, who is going to be welcoming Danielle.
Diana. Yeah, I can go ahead. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Diana Correa, who is a student at the National University of Tierra del Fuego. She's studying their sociology and is collaborating with the Institute for Indigenous Peoples, and they are doing educational materials and supporting consultation processes in relation to conservation. She'll present in Spanish. The slides have some English written, so I hope you can bear with most of it. Diana, puedes empezar.
Hola, hola a todos, ¿se escucha bien?
Un poco bajito.
Un poco bajito, ahí estamos. ¿Se escucha bien?
Sí.
Bueno, muchas gracias a todos por la invitación. Nuestro proyecto, consideramos que las políticas gubernamentales están atravesadas por la lógica de la modernidad y el colonialismo y marcan cuerpos y territorios en la cotidianidad. Entonces, la conservación no escapa a estas lógicas y reproduce las injusticias del pasado en el presente. En el caso de Tierra del Fuego, que es el sitio donde se desarrolló esta investigación, el pueblo Selknam atravesó una historia de genocidio, etnocidio y violencia hasta el punto que fue declarado extinto por la ciencia, el Estado y las misiones evangelizadoras. Por esta razón, y porque las comunidades no son consideradas como auténticas a causa de las transformaciones producidas en el proceso de colonización, sus derechos suelen ser vulnerados. Entre estos derechos, la participación y la consulta en los temas que les afectan es una conquista que supieron conseguir los movimientos indígenas. Sin embargo, en Tierra del Fuego no se ha desarrollado ningún proceso de consulta previa, libre e informada. A diferencia del consentimiento informado que realizan los investigadores en acuerdos muchas veces informales a sus interlocutores, la consulta previa, libre e informada la realiza el Estado o las empresas y debe realizarse a la comunidad en conjunto. Los cuestionamientos a la autenticidad de las comunidades conduce a que se exacerben las asimetrías y sus saberes. Los cuestionamientos a la autenticidad, entonces produce esto y no son considerados como tales. Esto evidencia que las políticas se orientan a partir de los saberes científicos que son considerados como legítimos, mientras que los saberes indígenas, los indígenas mismos, son subalternizados. Entonces me pregunto, ¿cómo es posible que se implementen procesos de consulta si los pueblos indígenas no son considerados como auténticos y legítimos? ¿Existen instancias en las que estos pueblos tensionen estas ideas? Mi acercamiento a estos temas está atravesado en primer lugar con mi historia personal y la de mi familia, perteneciente a un pueblo indígena del norte de Argentina. Mi historia familiar está marcada porque está plagada de silencio sobre este mismo origen. Ya en la universidad, particularmente, en la cátedra de antropología, me vi interpelada con interrogantes en torno a mi identidad y mi lugar en el mundo. La universidad se convirtió así en un espacio en donde pude dar cuenta de mi pertenencia a un pueblo indígena, al tiempo que conocía la otra historia de la colonización de Tierra del Fuego. Como respuesta a los reclamos de integrantes de distintas comunidades y organizaciones indígenas sobre la falta de participación en el ámbito universitario, a finales del año 2019 se conformó la Cátedra Libre de Pueblos Originarios de la Universidad Nacional de Tierra del Fuego. Fui convocada a participar de esta cátedra y allí me encontré con múltiples realidades, reivindicaciones, luchas, así como historias. Cuando se realizó la convocatoria a la participación en este proyecto, pude reunir mis búsquedas e intereses vinculados a los pueblos originarios, con otras inquietudes pendientes, como los territorios, territorialidades y políticas de conservación. Entonces me propuse indagar en torno al Plan de Manejo del Territorio Comunitario, una propuesta de la Dirección Provincial de Bosque, que se orienta fundamentalmente a la conservación y el comanejo del bosque nativo del territorio comunitario, es decir, entre el Estado y las comunidades. Este proyecto que planea, este plan en realidad que plantea la intervención estatal en la gestión del territorio comunitario, no contó desde su inicio con las instancias participativas, ¿no? Que implica que se contemplen a todas las personas y las familias involucradas. Por esta razón, ha suscitado denuncias por parte del Consejo de Ancianos de la comunidad y referentes históricos de la comunidad que ven vulnerado su derecho a la autonomía y la autodeterminación. La comunidad de Rafaela Ishton, que es quien tiene estos territorios comunitarios, está conformada por alrededor de 700 miembros del pueblo Selknam. En el territorio conviven unas 10 familias que tienen que lidiar a diario con la explotación de empresas privadas y que van y explotan la turba y la madera, y que operan de forma abusiva, aprovechándose de las necesidades de algunas personas y generando serios conflictos comunitarios. Es en este marco que el conservacionismo estatal argumenta que es necesaria una intervención de la Dirección de Bosques para ayudar a las comunidades sin su consentimiento, promoviendo un supuesto manejo sostenible al tiempo que no ejerce el debido control sobre las empresas. La actual situación del pueblo Selknam y sus territorios comunitarios, que pretenden ser intervenidos estatalmente, sin una consulta previa, libre e informada, así como la explotación con la que conviven en el día a día, reflejan, consideramos, la actualización de las injusticias del pasado en el presente. Y remarcamos esta parte, ¿no? Injusticias que suelen ser contestadas a su vez por referentes de la comunidad, por los referentes comunitarios. Es decir, frente a este avance hay resistencia. Y desde una perspectiva colaborativa, este proyecto, y me propongo como objetivo, acompañar entonces las agendas y los reclamos de la comunidad en lo que respecta a la participación y toma de decisión en cuestiones que les afectan, particularmente las que hacen de la conservación del territorio comunitario para revertir estas herencias coloniales. Acá presentamos una foto del viaje que hizo Mara y que tuvimos en el territorio en el mes de junio, en pleno invierno. Y bueno, entre las líneas de trabajo que venimos llevando a cabo se encuentra la generación de materiales educativos de forma colaborativa, ¿no? Con la comunidad, Rafaela Ishton también y referentes de otras comunidades indígenas, presentando también soporte a procesos de consulta, colaborando en estos proyectos de ecoturismo. Y por último, estamos trabajando con organizaciones ambientales locales. Estas son un poco las líneas principales que comenzamos y que proyectamos seguir adelante el año que viene, tal vez. Así que bueno, eso es todo. Disculpen los nervios y muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Diana. Y ahora, sorry. And now we are going to have some words from Cecilia Gerard, who is the partner in Tierra del Fuego, and she'll talk for about a minute on her vision on this collaboration. Cecilia.
Well, I want to thank William and Mary for this opportunity to work together, especially to Mara Dicenta for the collaborative work and stimulating co-working. And I want to congratulate Diana because she's such a brilliant student and she's very committed with the indigenous struggles and their agendas. This research is a sign of the importance of linking both institutions to promote just conservation policies and to reverse colonial injustices. So thank you very much, Diana, for your hard work, and we hope to continue moving forward with this research.
Thank you so much, Diana. We feel like you're here with us in person here in Williamsburg. So thank you so much. And thank you, Cecilia, for your collaboration. All right, thank you for sticking with us. Last but not least, we have Katie Clark, who worked in close collaboration with the Virginia Department of Forestry to explore the impact of the Next Generation program. And after Katie's presentation, we will invite you all who are joining us in person to a reception in the lobby.
Hi, everybody. I'm Katie, and this year I've been working with the Virginia Department of Forestry and the Virginia Cooperative Extension, focusing in on the question, what is the impact of Virginia's Generation Next program and how do we improve it? So just some background information about Generation Next and why it's such an important program. It was started a little over a decade ago as a collaboration between the Virginia Department of Forestry and the Virginia Cooperative Extension. And its main focus is on educating and equipping family forest land owners with the tools that they need to plan successfully for the future of their forest land for generations on. And that goes beyond just some sort of a state plan and focuses on creating what they call a legacy plan, which is really a comprehensive plan for both, the estate and also your heirs and your wishes for forest land management. And now that the program has been around for a little over a decade, we're kind of curious on determining the impact of the program on those who have used it and identifying some key results from the program thus far. And for Gen Next, that comes in the form of, has the program effectively reduced the number of forest land divisions and conversions, and has it increased the creation of legacy plans? And with that information, developing some recommendations for the program that can improve its outreach. And the how we did this was by surveying hundreds of Virginian forest land owners in order to compare two groups, those who had participated in the Gen Next program and those who were family forest land owners but had not participated in this program, create some comparisons to try to identify some results. And we did. So looking first at the idea of reducing divisions or conversions, our survey indicates that Gen Next participants did convert about the same percentage of land as non-participants. However, in terms of divisions, Gen Next participants did note a significant reduction in the number of forest land division following their participation in the program, which is a good result. In terms of legacy planning creation, we outlined around 12 key factors that go into creating a legacy plan. Of these steps, Gen Next participants had a higher percentage of partial to full completion for every single step, but a significantly higher completion rate for 7 out of these 12 steps. Which is, this is good because as the primary goal of Gen Next is to kind of focus in on creating these legacy plans, it's kind of showing that this program is helping with that. Another result we gathered, it was general perceptions of the Generation Next program within Virginia landowners. And this program is well regarded even by non-participants. For those who did participate in the program, over 90% said that they agreed that this program improved their forest land management. And the non-participants who are familiar with the program view it in a neutral or a positive manner. And using all of this result data, The primary recommendation is to fill a sort of a gap in the knowledge on how to engage the next generation, which is a little ironic given that the whole project is about planning for Generation Next. And what we're seeing here is a lot of feedback about people who don't quite know how to get their heirs involved in forest land management. You can create all the plans that you want, you can get the legal work drawn up, but if your heirs simply aren't interested in managing forest land, then you have a barrier there. So the recommendations towards improving Gen Next here focus in on tools and education techniques to engage the next generation. We've had a lot of suggestions for some sort of online learning module since our generation loves to do things online. And then lastly, I just want to talk about kind of the why we do all of this, the broader implications. Family-owned forest land is at a unique risk because it can be parcelized during periods of intergenerational transfer. Most people have multiple heirs, and that land can be split up, divided amongst them. And if not every heir wants to manage forest land, then that land will likely get sold off to developers and will no longer be in forest. And as you can see from these two charts, in Virginia specifically, individual and families make up 60% of Virginia's forest land. And even nationwide, this group still controls more forest and woodland than any other group. So improving Gen Next, a Virginia specific program, can help improve forest land conservation nationwide. I would like to thank the Institute for Integrative Conservation, the Gen Next team, and specifically my IIC mentor, Dr. Rob Rose, and my Gen Next mentors, Carl and Adam.
So Carl, you're a real trooper. I saw that you logged on at 2. So thank you so much for listening. And I want to invite you to unmute and provide a reflection on the relevance of Katie's work.
No problem. Thanks very much, Erica. And thanks to Katie, the IIC, and her advisors. This is really a stunning product from Katie that she's created for the Generation Next program, and what I think is a very short period of time. We basically threw her into a very deep pool and asked her to swim. She had to quickly learn how to use several new complex tools to complete the project, including survey tools, database management tools, and complex statistical approaches. And she did a fantastic job at managing all of those quickly. Simply put, her work will help us know if the Generation Next program is being effective, and more importantly, how we can improve it and scale it up. For example, we'll have a better sense of if our workshops, materials, and outreach are being effective in training and encouraging people to complete estate planning for the forested properties. It'll also tell us if we've made some really bad assumptions about what barriers are preventing people from doing legacy planning, such as financial challenges, or a lack of specific kind of support that Katie just mentioned, like family mediation. Who would have known? Or if a group of landowners does not feel that the program is really representing them or is really for them. With this knowledge, I'm really confident that we'll be able to evolve the program to be more effective at encouraging people to engage in legacy planning and ultimately preventing fragmentation and conversion of Virginia's forests. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Carl. Appreciate it. All right. Well, thank you all so much for sticking with all these presentations today. If you would like to get more involved in the IIC, I suggest visiting the IIC website where you can learn about all the various ways to get involved. And also that is where you can sign up for our listserv, which is where we'll be sending out advertisements for opportunities to get involved in research, whether you're a student, a conservation partner, or faculty member, as well as opportunities to get involved in events. We're about to post some semester-long research opportunities for this next spring. So if you're interested in that, please check out our website. We also have several conservation-focused courses, and there's also an opportunity to either major or minor in integrated conservation. So check out our website to learn about how you can get more involved. For faculty and conservation partners, we are looking for projects for the spring semester now, so reach out to us. And then we'll be sending out a request for proposals for the 2024 year-long conservation research program later this spring. But feel free to email us with any ideas at any time if you would like to work with students on projects that you propose. We started with gratitude. We want to end with gratitude by thanking you all for being a part of this incredible community of conservation partners, faculty members, students, and just thank our broader conservation community. I saw that we have several alumni here, parents, community members, donors who have all joined us here today. This would not be possible without this incredible interdisciplinary community. So thank you all. And then finally, I want to thank the students in this year's conservation research program. You all have been such a delight to work with. I think we've all learned a ton from you all. And we're just so proud of you. And in addition to just producing incredible research, you've also just shown to be just incredible people. So thank you so much for all of your incredible work. And for those of you who are joining us over Zoom, thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of this community. For those of you here in person, please join us in the undergraduate lounge, I think that's what it's called, fancy here, to enjoy some snacks and also ask the students some questions. Students, feel free to grab some food first. You've earned it. And thank you all.
So